Today, we're diving into a really fascinating story of religious transformation. It's all about how a historically conservative Christian church in Ghana completely reinvented itself, embracing practices that, believe it or not, once went against its deepest beliefs.
So let's just start with this quote. To set a person free from Satan's control. Wow, that is a powerful mission statement, right? It sounds like direct spiritual warfare, the kind of thing you'd expect to hear from a charismatic or Pentecostal church.
And here is where it gets really interesting. This mission, it doesn't belong to some new Pentecostal movement. It's the core mission of a Presbyterian church, and a huge one at that. We're talking a massive 5,000-seat building. So the first question that pops into your head is, how on earth did that happen?
And that, right there, is a central puzzle we're going to unpack in this explainer. How did a church, rooted in a theology that basically said, hey, the age of miracles is over, how did it become this modern hub for what the source material calls enchanted Calvinism, a powerful belief in divine healing for today?
To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to the 1960s, a time when the Presbyterian Church of Ghana was facing a pretty serious crisis, one that was threatening its very future.
So here you can see the conflict laid out perfectly. On one hand, you have the original, traditional belief. Miracles stopped with the apostles, and today, God works through things like medicine and science. But on the other hand, you have this new, enchanted view that says, nope, Jesus is still the great physician, and supernatural healing is for right here, right now. That's a massive theological jump to make.
You know, this wasn't just some dusty theological argument happening in a seminary. This was about survival. The church was literally watching its members walk out the door and head to Pentecostal churches that were offering exactly what people were looking for: direct, spiritual answers to their problems. The leadership had a choice, and it was a stark one: adapt or just fade away.
So, how did they adapt? Well, a change this big doesn't happen overnight. It was really a perfect storm of decisions made from the inside and some pretty powerful ideas coming from the outside that started to reshape the church from its very core.
The source material really boils it down to three key drivers. First, the church leadership itself made a bold, conscious decision to change. Second, they created a group within the church to make it happen. And third, they were being shaped by outside groups that were, you could say, already experts in these kinds of charismatic practices.
Let's look at how that worked. This group, the Bible Study and Prayer Group, or BSPG for short, became the official engine for this whole transformation. This wasn't some rogue faction. It was sanctioned from the top down. They set up a formal structure with teams for deliverance, for counseling. They turned these new practices into an organized part of church life.
Then you have the influence from the outside. Scripture Union was a huge player, especially with young people. By bringing deliverance theology into schools and youth groups, they were basically raising a whole new generation of Presbyterians who saw these practices as totally normal, not strange at all.
And you can never underestimate the power of media. The Sudan Interior Mission was broadcasting these ideas over the radio right into people's homes across the country. Plus, its bookstore was making all this literature on spiritual deliverance easy to get. They were changing the whole spiritual conversation on a massive scale.
You know, big movements like this are often embodied by a key person. And in this story, that person is catechist Ebenezer Aboah Ofe. His personal journey is like a perfect mirror of the transformation his entire church was going through.
Just look at his life story. You can see all the pieces falling into place. He's born into a traditional Presbyterian family. But then he has this born-again experience through Scripture Union, one of those influential groups we just talked about. He gets a degree in agriculture, a man of science, but he's also being pulled into this charismatic spiritual world. And it all leads him to found Grace Church.
And like a lot of these stories, there's this one pivotal moment, a turning point that's almost like something from a movie. He's running a poultry farm and disaster strikes. His chickens get a batch of poisoned feed and they just start dropping dead. In this moment of total desperation, he turns to prayer.
And this was it. This was the moment. He says that after he prayed, not a single other bird died. For him, that was all the confirmation he needed. He figured if this power works on animals, it absolutely has to be used for the much deeper suffering of human beings. That was the spark for his entire ministry.
And that brings us right back to Grace Church today. See, fueled by Aboah Ofe's vision, it's not just a place of random, spontaneous miracles. No, it's a highly organized center with a clear step-by-step system for deliverance.
So,
what exactly is deliverance in this context? Well, according to the church's own definition, it's a direct confrontation with what they see as demonic forces. It's about using the spiritual authority of Jesus' name to break Satan's control over a person's life, whether that shows up as sickness, bad luck, or mental anguish.
And their process is incredibly structured, almost like intake at a spiritual clinic. It all starts with a super detailed questionnaire to look for spiritual roots to the problem. Then the person has to affirm their faith before they can move on. After that, there's a one-on-one counseling session, which all leads up to a diagnosis and a very specific, targeted prayer. It's a real system.
And get this, they have this key rule that shows they're really thinking about the social impact of their work. A diagnosis of a witchcraft attack from a family member could obviously tear families apart. So they have a policy. They will not name the person. Instead of fueling accusations and conflict, they redirect all that energy back towards prayer.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Because the story of Grace Presbyterian isn't just about one church or one man. It's really a snapshot of a huge shift happening all across Christianity in Ghana.
So did this whole strategy actually work? Well, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. In just a 4-year period, the Presbyterian Church of Ghana grew by 17%. For comparison, the other major mainline church, the Methodists, grew by only 2%. Clearly, embracing deliverance was an incredible engine for growth.
At the end of the day, the Presbyterians weren't just competing with the Pentecostals. In a way, they were becoming more like them. The source argues that the very same forces, the same groups, the same books, the same ideas, were enchanting all of Ghanaian Christianity, blurring the old lines between denominations.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This isn't just a story about theology. It's a story about adaptation. It shows how even the most established religious institutions can fundamentally change to meet the real-world spiritual needs and anxieties of their people in a world that's constantly changing around them.